Hello and welcome to the Marketing Trail Guide podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Krushevich, founder of Marketing Trail Guide and fractional chief marketing officer for companies running on the Entrepreneurial Operating System, or EOS. In this first season, Opportunities in Crisis, I've been talking with business leaders and entrepreneurs about how to survive and thrive in times of uncertainty. This is episode 13, Understanding Your Customers with Katie Rucker. Katie is the co-owner and president of MacKenzie Corporation, a consumer insights and market research firm that brings passion and curiosity together to empower brands to create remarkable customer experiences and drive growth opportunities. In my conversation with Katie, we talk about how companies across all industries need to keep the conversation going during the COVID-19 crisis and how they can use data insights and analytics to drive better and personalized customer experiences. We also discuss how brands can better position themselves to make sure that they're listening and providing what's needed in this very transitional, challenging time for their customers. Without further delay, here is my interview with Katie Rucker. Well, Katie, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here today.
So first, let's just jump in and talk about MacKenzie Corporation as a business. What do you do to help your customers? What are your competencies?
Sure. So we're in the customer insights market research space, really bringing together passion and curiosity to empower brands to create remarkable customer experiences. So really, we just believe in the power of leveraging data and research to gain clarity in your marketing messaging, your sales approach, product development, those types of things.
Okay, I heard a buzzword in there that I want to talk about later, which is data and the importance of that. But before we go into that, I thought it just might be fun to hear about the business origin stories, and I love these. And I know that MacKenzie is a family-run business. Maybe you could tell us about that backstory of kind of what got you to. Maybe not this point today, but take us to pre-COVID, because obviously lots changed. Take us to pre-COVID.
I love that. And actually, I'll take you to April 22nd, which is in the middle of COVID, but that was actually our 35th anniversary, was April 22nd. So we're a second generation family owned business. So I run the company. I'm co-owner and co-president with my twin sister. Our lawyers always tell us it's not good to have two presidents, but when you're a twin, you kind of are just used to always being together. So our dad started the company in our bonus room of our house 35 years ago. He came from the consulting space, KPMG, those types of things, and was at kind of a breaking point or a transition point, wanting to be able to do something on his own, but didn't exactly know what that was. And April 22nd is my mom's birthday, and they were sitting at Main Beach, and a past client of his happened to walk by him, and they just started chatting, and he was talking about an issue or a problem that he was having. And my dad said, well, if you actually do have this, do you have this, do you have this? He's like, you could take these 3 different data sets, put them together, and I think we'd be able to solve your problem. So right there on Main Beach, he started MacKenzie Corporation. So it's evolved from there, but really at the core, it's always remained the same. How do we lean in and listen to what our clients' problems are, and then help them to be empowered to leverage, data that they're already sitting on, or collect additional data points. So at the core, it is what it is. But so many people say too now, how did you start a data company or a data analytics firm 35 years ago? Obviously, it would be fundamentally different than how you would start one today.
Sure.
So it's been quite the journey since my sister and I got involved. We took over ownership in 2012. Because now it's just, before there maybe wasn't as much access to data, and now it's like a fire hose. And so it's really actually like, how do we help empower brands to take that data, turn it into insights, knowledge, and wisdom to be able to better leverage what they're sitting on.
That's fascinating. And so we're living in this deluge of data, and not even necessarily related to the fact that now IoT devices can talk to us, but what do we listen to? Is that part of the conversation that you have with your clients of how do we prioritize data and bring those insights rather than deciphering signals from noise?
Sure. I think that, yes, that is a part of the process. So we are more of a consulting type firm. We don't have a technology that can be utilized or, incorporated into an IT department. And really a lot of it just comes down to what is the problem that you're trying to solve, right? So, there's so much data out there, and depending on what problem you're trying to solve should really then be what you're listening to. That's always step one for us. We really also try to then say, what information do you have internally? So how can we help you do an audit of what data you're already sitting on? Because we don't want to then go to research or something like that when then in the end you're like, well, I already knew that because I was sitting on this. So we try to walk through a strategic process where then it's saying, okay, if we know that this is what your problem is, and whether that can be our sales aren't there, so we need to improve or change marketing messaging. If it's marketing messaging, then when you start doing marketing audit to be able to look at the effectiveness of the marketing data that you're sitting on, those types of things. So it really, I think the biggest thing is starting with what problem are we trying to solve instead of boiling down the ocean.
Absolutely. So now take us through COVID. COVID hits. What have you seen change in your customers' businesses as a result of COVID? And I want to talk about your business and how you're adapting as a leader later. But what are you noticing in the market in terms of the actual businesses that are out there when you get into the data and as they're listening to their own customer base?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We have clients across a lot of different verticals. One of our largest clients is a OEM in the power sports industry. That's going through the roof. Like recreation and outdoor space is really amazing. Actually, right now, fascinating to watch. But mainly, right, you can't.
So one of the things that you can do that you're allowed to do at this point is go outdoors still and hop on a motorcycle.
Exactly. And that I think is really fascinating and exciting opportunity because now I believe that it's the pool's getting bigger, right? More people are getting into those industries and bicycles. So, I mean, it's everything. It's not just even on the power sports side. It's anything that's outdoor and recreational. Those kinds of industries are, exploding. And I think that this is an amazing time for them to be able to actually reach out specifically to those customers and say, what prompted you to buy now, right? So it's either they were in the consideration phase or I hadn't really thought about it, but a friend of mine has it. And now this is something that I'd love to be able to join him to go do or her to go do that I couldn't do before. We though then have clients who are in the home building space. And obviously right now, I mean, maybe not obviously, but home sales are not, people aren't going in and touring homes or touring different types of things. So those, are down. So what you need to kind of do in that space is then still keep the conversation going. And I think businesses just across the whole, whether they're our clients or just businesses in general, I think they're falling into kind of two camps. Either they're pulling back on marketing, pulling back on relationships, or one-to-one kind of contact with those, and then waiting till you can come out on the other side because they're trying to cut expenses, which I understand at like a surface level. But then the other camp who is really leaning in on those relationships and leaning in to see how their product and service needs to be shifted for the kind of new landscape that we're in.
Yep.
And I think those ones are going to be the ones who are not only surviving well today, but then are going to be positioned to really thrive. So, I think it's just, there are kind of the different camps on where people are going. I don't think that today is the time to stop talking to people.
Yeah, and listening to people, right? And I think I'm interested in sort of geeking out on some of the psychological impact or the analogous experience between interpersonal relationships, where when the only one person's talking and the other one's and they're not listening, and there's not this this two-way communication happening, the relationship really shuts down and it becomes kind of this me first. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, even in terms of the philosophy behind why should we be listening, and how does that play an important role in product development, in pivoting to the market, or as it's sometimes put, paddling out to where the surf is breaking.
Sure. I think it's really, it's fascinating. Actually, I have something written down that sits on my, right above my desk at the office, that really talks about how one-to-one marketing or one-to-one relationships that we have with our customers. And we talk all about one-to-one marketing, but really that is just, I'm sending you more personalized content based on where I've seen you go on my website or where I'm following you on the internet. It's not actually because you've taken the time, generally, that you've taken the time to actually get to know me, right, and that we are truly having a one-to-one relationship. And that's the part, kind of like what you said, geeking out on that. That's the part that we're extremely passionate about. We just believe that we have one life, and especially even during this time that we have right now, and we should, each day should be filled with really remarkable experiences. And so if we have the opportunity to be able to lean in and really truly get to know the whole person of who our customer is, not just the fact that we know that they buy XYZ because that's what we sell, but how do they actually like use that product in their whole life? How do they do those types of things? People want to talk. They want to share their opinions. We know that, especially if you then follow, if you don't give them that avenue, they're posting on social media, they're posting reviews, they're posting here, they're posting there. So why would you not initiate that conversation? The one thing we say though adamantly is don't do research, or don't ask somebody's opinion so that you can check that box. Use that for innovation and change, and then provide feedback back to your customer base. Hey, we heard and this is what we've done with it. And that then they're like, oh, somebody listened to me. And then that relationship keeps going. So I think that there's so much value in being able to have a two-way conversation with your customers. It doesn't have to be overthought sometimes either, like one or two questions and asking kind of along the way. Create advisory panels, create user groups, create ways to have a facilitated conversation, because then you're actually creating your products specifically to the needs that your customers have today. And that changes, obviously it changes more right now than it ever did before, but I think that right now is such an amazing catalyst to be able to start those conversations if you weren't before.
Yeah, there's a couple things going around in my mind as you describe that. One is the expectation that is set when you do collect that data. I think I was reading in this book, The Automatic Customer, that talks about kind of subscription types of businesses where we're collecting so much data, or at least we can, or at least the Amazons of the world are all training us that this can be done. And if we don't take that data into account when we are in that relationship, the customer notices that because they're having an experience that's being shaped by those that are. And so as we move forward, there may even be a polarization between companies that can do that and are willing to do that, and those that aren't or can't. And the customer experience is drastically different from those companies that can and cannot.
Yeah. And thinking about your business as a whole continuity, right? And so, thinking about, I was just reading some survey results the other day that then was like one of the comments said, and it was around the financing side of things. So they had bought a motorcycle. So on the sales side of things, you have all of my information. And then when you walk me over to the finance department and I start filling this out, I'm now filling out my name again. Like, why are those two like all not interconnected? And it's because I think businesses historically have been in this siloed approach, but a continuum customer experience or customer journey through your whole entire business operation is, like you said, it has been more and more expected from the consumer, especially with like the connected devices and those types of things. When I pull in and that my car, if you can read the data about my car and you're collecting it all, but when I get there, you ask me to fill stuff out again, people aren't going to like really buy the authenticity about what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I think, if we're really honest, maybe more honest than we would want to admit on a podcast, we have to ask the question, do I actually care? And I know that might seem like a foregone conclusion, but we can easily get in the mode of product pushing, revenue, customer as a means to an end, and being product centric versus customer or user centric. And so, one of the things I keep coming back to in this is having to ask the question, who is this for? Not only what is this product for, but who is this for, and who am I for? Who are we for? I might be able to sell any number of things to this we, or to this you, this group of people that my heart really beats for. And I think for a lot of brands, to go that next level in terms of being a human brand, and we hear that as a buzzword a lot lately, it's really getting to understand yourself and your core values, and then who your heart beats for, and then how do we help them. And that might entail products and services, but it actually might entail something very different than we're doing right now for, who knows, whoever wants to buy our stuff out there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's fascinating. And research really has shown, again, kind of we're still in like the pre-COVID side because I haven't dug into it as much, but I actually think it's going to exemplify this. But certain generations, right, the younger generations, though, are going to start demanding more authenticity, transparency, knowing that like brands, care more about the sustainability, the environment, how they treat all stakeholders, not just the shareholders who sit at the board table. So I do believe that brands need to take this moment of pause to like really look internal and dig into like what you were just talking about, because I also believe that consumer spending will start to change that, because people will buy from brands who show that they cared. The research was starting to show that already, and I think it's going to show that tenfold now that we're in the middle of this.
So there's a little voice inside of me right now that's bringing up an objection, and I want to voice it real quick because I wonder if some of our listeners are thinking the same thing. And that voice is saying, "But Katie, that sounds really expensive, and we're in a price-conscious economy. How do we do that right now?"
I think that's a really great question. I think that it is. I don't know if it has to be totally expensive, though. I mean, I think that there's different ways of having to look at it. But I think going into like what you talked about is, what are your core values and how are you actually just truly living those? So that's an inside out kind of thing. So how is your corporate culture matching your values? If you have this value statement on your website or on your wall, how is your corporate culture matching that? And that just in itself starts to then resonate out. It's any interaction that any of your employees, your customer service people, the service department, the sales department, the whatever, what are they pushing out and how are they making your customer base feel appreciated, feel valued? That actually doesn't cost, it will cost money in terms of training, but that just right there in itself is something that you can start making an organic change and shift. That's not a huge capital investment to be able to do that.
And I think, the reality is it takes a mindset, and forgive me if this is a foregone conclusion, but it actually takes a mindset that you care about people. And I think
not every business is going to be right. Not every business is going to do it, because some businesses are in the business to make as much money as they possibly can, right?
But this even starts internally, though, doesn't it? I mean, like if I just am trying to redline my employees and eke out the next ounce of productivity from them, without a thought toward the human aspect of it and really just using them as a means to an end, doesn't that also kind of get reflected in how we do business customer facing? And doesn't that just sort of trickle down into the end user in the market?
100%. But I think this is kind of a time to actually then be able to talk where some of the catalyst for change is going to come as being kind of in a way like a push change coming from the consumer side of things. If we think about the like reopening now of switching to the pre to post, and we're not in a post-COVID, but what does the world look like on the other side? What consumers were okay with going into a store, now they're going to care about what is the safety, how are you caring about me, instead of just pushing a product, right? So even if you have the least expensive, if you take two companies and one is a less expensive product, but you have to go into their store and they don't have the same safety precautions, people will then spend more to go because you cared about my safety when I'm coming back into your establishment. Mm-hmm. So I do think that this is also going to be starting to be a shift where businesses are going to have to start also thinking about their customers before the sale, because they have to then show I care about you to get you into those stores. That's at least for the brick and mortars.
Yeah, and I think one of the common mistakes that can happen as business owners, even marketing people, are thinking about their customer base is that I am my own ideal client profile, and that if I care about something, they must care about something. There's a lot of ideological divide right now about, do we need masks? Are masks healthy or not? Masks not healthy? Is this thing overblown? Is this thing underblown? And so there's kind of the ideological aspect to it. But at the end of the day, practically and pragmatically speaking, the end customer gets to decide if you want to align with that. You can or you cannot. My own ideological perspective on that is really irrelevant to whether or not they're going to buy something from me.
Yeah, yeah. I think right now is an interesting time too, if we're thinking about what are opportunities that you can be doing. I think doing a brand perception type study. So it's not so much even a brand awareness, do you know about me? Brand perception, what do you think about me? Or what do you
Right.
think about our business? And how has that perception changed during this crisis so that you can be then also putting that into consideration. So we shouldn't make decisions within vacuums. So we shouldn't make the decision about like, how fast can I open these doors? How fast can we redo the, you know, restart influxing the sales that are going to be able to be happening. We need to also think, what are people thinking about my brand right now? Or what's the perception? Because that perception is reality, whether it's right or wrong, or is there a misalignment? That's another way of being able to say, like, what's something that you can do to be able to start matching against the values. If the consumer or the general population thinks this of your brand, but your values say that you're this, then you know at least what your gap is, and then you can start to work to shift that, right? So that then you're not just automatically starting to do something. I think being able to do that gap analysis is extremely valuable part of it as well.
It's a look in the mirror, and offline we were talking about COVID business attire, and so sometimes it's really helpful to look in the mirror and find out, what do I look like from the outside?
Mm-hmm. That's funny. I just said that yesterday to one of my team members. I said, can you just call me on the phone? Because I said, it's exhausting having to stare at myself all day long. Like, because that's what we end up doing on these Zoom calls. Like, right. You're not used to having to do that. So that is kind of funny. And I think it comes back to, like you said, it's the philosophical side. What does a business want to actually do that kind of hard work? And it is hard, and especially in the middle of something like this. But personally, I believe it's the right thing to do. But again, all of us have different kinds of philosophies on how to run our business. I just think that thinking about all stakeholders is really just the right thing to do. But that's, again, one of our core values is servant leadership. How do we lead in service? How do we lead to be able to help others first and then ourselves? But that's I think it comes from our family values, which then is incorporated into our family business and, comes through in the work that we do and why we think that it's valuable.
Yep. I think that owner and leader level reflection, kind of self-evaluation of, like, am I living my values? And am I willing to hear voices that might be telling me that I'm not living my best self. I'm not living my best life, as it were, in terms of, I say I'm about X, but I'm not there. And I think values are interesting in that, they are aspirational, but I think mostly they have to be true at some basic level. They're true of us. They indicate what we value, but they also lead us on, right? So there's this dance of, this is what I want to be about, and this is me, and this is our company as our best self. But it's kind of that ideal that we have to shoot for every day that we're looking to measure up toward. And I think this COVID reality has been an interesting litmus test of, do we actually believe and do the things we say we believe?
Yeah.
In a very interesting way.
Yeah, I truly believe at a personal and then at like a professional, but so it can be, how are we personally, and then how our business is. I believe that true colors are coming out during this, right? So, I mean, a crisis is going to show, I think during good times, we can be a good leader. I think that, and a leader either, again, personally or as a business and leading within our industry and our verticals and how we are with our clients. I think in this crisis, it really is going to say, how do we perform under stress? How are we growing? What are we doing? Who are we? And I think that that's going to be the part too that comes with that brand perception side of things, is what we can still think that we're performing really well, but if we're not open to hearing from the other people, like you said, and take that time to look in the mirror, I think that there's value in all of that. But I believe that this situation for sure is showing just true colors of who people and businesses are.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to be told we have spinach in our teeth, but we sure are glad when we find that out, because it limits the embarrassment, right? And we can move forward without spinach in our teeth. I think that's a good segue. We're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to dive into just some of the mindset concepts as a leader. Want to dig into your experience as a leader with your team and how you're navigating COVID. So we'll be back with Katie Rucker in just a couple minutes.
I'll I'll never forget the look on my wife's face when the doctor gave us the news. Although he tried to break it to us gently, as soon as he said the word cancer, we knew our lives would never be the same. If it was me that was sick, that I could handle. But not one of my babies. Over the next few months, our battle for life took us far from home and into a confusing world of surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. Sleepless nights at the hospital were followed by weeks of living apart. While the hospital was doing a great job caring for our daughter, we were struggling to keep our little family together. With money running out and our marriage being tested and our other daughter suffering from the strain, we were barely hanging on. While you might know it as the Ronald McDonald House, for us it will always be our own personal miracle, and we're not the only ones who've experienced this magical place. From the moment we walked through the front doors, we knew this was special. While it was great to have a place so close to the hospital where a whole family could stay together, we soon realized this was so much more than a house. The staff and volunteers were unbelievable. They made us feel like we were the most important guests that had ever stayed there. It wasn't until later that we found out they make all the guests feel that way. Having our own private room to retreat to when things got rough was something we really appreciated. And when we didn't feel like being alone, the chance to share a meal with other families who were going through the exact same thing as us was so powerful. In fact, that turned out to be one of the most important parts of our stay, sharing our pain with other people who truly understood. Some of those people will be friends of ours for the rest of our lives. Coming back from a long day at the hospital, it was great to walk into the house and be treated to a meal prepared by these amazing volunteers. At the house, they call them meals of love or happy meals. To us, they were part of the miracle. The fact that there were people who cared this much for us was huge. It really was. It meant much more than just a meal. One of our favorite things about the house was the laundry room. While this may sound a little strange, doing laundry together was one of the most normal things we had done in months. And to have internet access and computers, and a place for the kids to play, and transportation, and outdoor space to have a barbecue, and so much more. And then there were those things that no one would have ever expected. I cried the day that the local hair salon came to the house and cut and styled my wife's hair. It had been so long since she had taken any time for herself, and the difference it made for her is hard to describe. I had that same feeling when Lisa delivered a gift basket to our room that included a bathrobe and slippers and some other things that made my wife feel special. It was so unexpected, yet so wonderful. And as if that wasn't enough, I need to tell you about Camp Ronald McDonald for Good Times. When our doctor first suggested that our daughter go to camp, we could not even imagine it. How could a child who was weak from chemo and radiation go to camp? But when we found out that there were medical facilities and volunteer doctors and nurses, and that cancer patients had been attending this camp for 30 years, we thought we'd give it a try. And then our little girl had a chance to do something that she had only heard about from her friends. She got to go to camp. Swimming, archery, hiking, horseback riding, and even a 50-foot climbing wall were all part of the magical week that she will never forget. It was on our way home from camp that we realized that the Ronald McDonald House Charities is so much more than a house.
Our 6 houses in Los Angeles, Orange County, Loma Linda, Pasadena, Bakersfield, and Long Beach truly are magical places. When you also consider our family rooms located inside local hospitals, our camp for children and families battling cancer, our college scholarship program for deserving high school seniors, and the $600,000 in annual grants we give to other charities serving children, I hope you would agree that we are much, much more than a house.
Welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is Katie Rucker from MacKenzie Corporation, and we've been talking about listening and relationships with our customer, how we can better position ourselves to make sure that we're listening and providing what's needed in a very transitional, challenging time for our customers. Katie, offline, you made the comment. You've been asking this of yourself. How can I make this COVID thing, kind of be the best thing that's ever happened to me? And asking yourself, who am I becoming in all of this? Tell us more about that mindset and that framework, and how are you keeping yourself in that positive space day in and day out?
Well, I will start with the last one. I am be the very first to admit that every day is not a positive day. So I think it's a challenge, right? It's how we wake up every day and we say, what am I going to do today to overcome and try to control what I can and accept that there's certain things that are going to be out of my control. I have been just for the last, I don't even know how many years, probably. I do know. 2014, I said life, I was kind of stuck. It was one of the things we were chatting about offline too, is as a business leader and how do we continue to stay inspired? So I started, 2014 was my year of saying yes to everything that scared me, but that I knew would help me grow, right? So doesn't mean I'm going to jump like bungee jump or whatever, because that's not going to really help me grow. But I just started saying yes to things in my life. It basically transformed with that philosophy, and it's something I've carried forward. But through that then the first step of that for me was then being able to acknowledge, which like you said is the looking in the mirror, is acknowledge where my weaknesses were so I could actually start getting help and learning. When this started, the first 4 weeks was the most crushingly overwhelming 4 weeks of my entire life, because, I've never taken a business fully remote in 24 hours. And, everyone's looking at you for answers of what to do. And I just felt out of control and overwhelmed. But then I realized, one, I'd been doing all this hard work. So it was like a stop and pause. I actually know I can do all these different things. And that was just a good kind of swift kick in the backside. But then also is then leaning into like a tribe and leaning into other business owners, leaning in when I don't know the answer. And so even now starting to think about, what does it mean to reopen a business, that's been closed or an office that's been closed because of a pandemic? Well, nobody has that answer. So instead of me, I was sitting thinking like, if I'm doing this on my own, that means other business leaders are doing it on their own. So I just started reaching out to people and asking for advice and questions. So for me, it's a commitment to, see what can I learn through the whole entire thing. But I definitely innately have a growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset. And I just really feel like this is an amazing opportunity. So to be able to, so this is not to lessen the pandemic that is actually happening, but I am blessed to be able to still be working. I am blessed to be able to have a house and have extra time with my kids and food on the table. So I'm choosing to say there's so much that I have to be grateful for, because I know so many other people aren't. And so how do I not get caught in the, woe is me, I'm stuck in my house? I now say I'm blessed to be able to have a house to be stuck in.
Yeah.
It's kind of where that is. I have all sorts of things that I try to do to keep myself busy, but
do you have any routines or disciplines on any kind of regular cadence that help you take that mindset that could go down the fear path and transform it into that positive channel?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, over time, when I started this kind of personal journey in 2014, my first thing I ever did was sign up for a half marathon that I'd never ran more than like 2 miles. And so it was like, how can I achieve something that I never thought I could do and go from there? So high intensity exercise has always been my jam since then. But I have found that actually in high times of stress, I actually need to have very low intensity. So I walk. I'm trying to take every single call that I'm not on like Zoom outside walking in my neighborhood. So just continuous movement helps me for sure. If I don't get what I'm kind of at like 20,000 steps a day instead of 10 right now.
Yeah. That's super practical. That's great.
Right? Because at least then I'm still moving. And I really do believe that movement, if you just sit in your chair, it's very easy to go down that whole spiral for too long. So if you move, your brain just starts functioning differently. And then you're outside in the sunshine. I mean, we're blessed to be here in Southern California. So for me, it's get outside. Like if I am not feeling totally right, it's just get outside. Because again, we're all on the phone taking calls all day long, and people are, gracious to ignore the trash man that happens to drive by when you're on a conference call.
Right.
And then for me, it's also then I'm a part of the Center for Family Business through Cal State Fullerton.
Okay.
And we've been doing weekly calls. So that's why we're doing Feel Good Friday this afternoon. But that's been extremely helpful for me. So it's being with other business leaders every single Friday afternoon. And sometimes there's like 6 people, sometimes there's 50 people. It really kind of depends. But again, having that consistent check-in, and some of those have been days of when like I'll just jump on, and there's usually a theme that we're talking about, but there's days that I'm like in the little chat on the side of saying I'm struggle busting today. And just to be able to say that out loud to other business leaders, I find it helpful, therapeutic.
So community, so get your body moving, and community is what I hear.
And giving back. I mean, that's my other big thing, but
what's the other big thing?
And giving back, or doing philanthropy, reaching out and doing those kinds of things. That's my other, if I'm feeling kind of bad, I send off a few emails.
Yeah. Phenomenal. And that certainly, I think, helps with perspective. And what was the thing about the Friday with the Cal State Fullerton? What's the thing you guys do on Friday? Tell us about that.
So Ed Hart is the center director over at the Center for Family Business. So we've been a part of the center when we first got involved in probably 2010. There's, 60 to 80 different family businesses, all different sizes. So our company's, 12 employees up to some that have like 1,000 employees. But we usually do like a monthly meeting and those types of things. But Ed Hart started basically, I think today is the 11th call, because it's basically right when Southern California kind of went into lockdown, just pulling together the community. So it was surviving in this time, and he just switched it to be thriving in this time. And we've talked about topics from, like I sent to him when I was starting to think about how do I reopen, the building. I was like, I can't be the only person. So I sent it to him, and he put together an hour and a half session where we actually brought in somebody to talk about mental health of your employees who are coming back, the cleaning, how to like legal side of things, those types of stuff. We've talked about all sorts of different topics. And then today, this afternoon, we're actually doing a Feel Good Friday where we're giving shout outs to businesses who have really been giving back to the community during this time. Because I think there's a lot, if you watch the news for even like 3 minutes, there's a lot of energy and polarizing opinions. So being able to spend an afternoon actually focusing on some like really positive impact that's happening in times when businesses can go into like fear mode and hunker down. It's being able to highlight those businesses who are actually like reaching out with an open hand to give to others first.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's so good. So as we kind of turn the corner here, I want to, begin to think about and pick your brain a little bit about, how do we look at incorporating marketing and market research into what we're doing in order to adapt? We've already talked about some of that a little bit in terms of, well, if you're listening to your customers, you know what they have an appetite for, or what the need is or the problem is, and that may be different than it was last month or 2 months ago. And so, maybe what's one step that we can take this week to strengthen our relationship with our customers, or put another way, be better listeners to our customers? What's one practical thing we can do?
Yeah. I think there's 2 things, and one isn't even having to reach out directly to your customers. One thing I think right now, I mean, we really are huge proponents about doing like a market map, or, understanding there's so much research and so much data that's just existing out there. And I think right now, especially with COVID, of talking about consumer behavior changes, but really being able to stop and think, and understand your competitive landscape and how your competitive landscape's probably changed, right? So, spring break, I was supposed to be going up the coast and staying at Pebble Beach and then into San Francisco doing different kinds of things. That all gets canceled. So instead, buy like a $500 inflatable pool for my backyard. Now, the Four Seasons probably was not thinking that the inflatable pool company was their competitor, but that's like where money's shifting. So now, how do you get me back in there? So just, I think one step, without actually even having to go directly yet to your customers, is starting to understand kind of your competitive landscape and how that's shifted, so that you can start thinking about that in terms of marketing. But then with your customers, I think just being able to, we all got any place that we've ever bought anything from, that we gave our email address, those first 2 weeks, we all got those letters. It's a hard time. Here's what we're doing. Those kinds of things.
Right.
When you're sending out your next newsletters, don't have it be, or your next email blast, don't have it be just like a blanket advertisement or a discount or something like that. Why don't you do it where you're actually saying, hey, we'd love to check in with you, and do like a 3-question survey that you can just be able to quickly get up, that's asking even just, how are you doing? What are you doing? Those types of things. So I think that there's ways to be able to incorporate listening into your marketing throughout the whole journey and start thinking about it that way.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal. And I think for me, it's challenging of getting out of that mode that I'm so used to being in, and really starting a new habit of caring first, and empathy first, which is not always, at least for me, my first go-to. Right? I want to get down to business, but really checking ourselves to see, are we in this for them, and is our product or service matching where they're at right now? As you started to talk about the inflatable pool, first of all, that sounds like an expensive inflatable pool. Although I'm not. I mean, that's such interesting. We could geek out on that for a little while, but I just began to think about the jobs to be done theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically, it's the job of the vacation was to get you out of the house and get you cool. And so you can do that. And the job of your pool now that you bought for a fraction of the cost it would have taken you to go up the coast is now fulfilling that job. Yeah. And so it's the same. I would look at podcasts actually the same way. I think people's podcasts listening experience and habits have changed, whereas the commute used to be when you'd listen. So if you're not commuting, either you've shifted when you can listen to podcasts. And for me, like I've always worked from home recently, but I don't have client meetings out now. Everything's over Zoom. So my podcast intake is way down. And so it's just interesting to begin to think about some of those dynamics of there's a gap now. The gaps have changed in people's lives, and where are those gaps? And there's opportunity there to meet your customer's need in
100%.
Those gaps.
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, again, this is not to like lessen, we are in a global pandemic, so that's not to take away from that, but I'm geeking out about this kind of situation that we're in right now, because it also is, I love the idea of being able to challenge ourselves and challenge our clients to be agile, to shift around things. I think there's a lot of opportunity where then people are giving, like I said, grace to be able to try something, and if it doesn't totally hit, or resonate, that you can be agile and you can move around. But I think consumer spending, while we're spending less, it's also shifting. And then it's understanding. And I was a sociology major in college, so I'm like fascinated by the inner workings of people and tribes and how that works. And, and all of that's been shifted. It's the same thing. We always talked about fitness, but really it's just exercise. And so fitness is associated with going to a gym, but now people are exercising, and they're exercising outside, right? So it's then saying, okay, if I offered a product that had to be used here, how do if I want to keep coming back, and the customer may never come back to that same philosophy. So it's having to be that agile and shifted. And that's where I get surveys now, like I love it. I'm getting them from like smaller businesses that are saying, what do you think? What would you be comfortable when we're going to open? Or when like a race, I'm a runner, so signing up for races. Now they're coming and saying, when would you feel comfortable traveling? When would you this? When would you that? They could be coming up with their whole business strategy in a vacuum, but instead they're showing and saying, what do you think we should do? And asking those opinions. So I don't know. I think that there's just some really interesting opportunities right now for businesses to be able to leverage this situation and to be able to really start integrating their customers into their process.
Yeah. And maybe even come back to a place where they're caring more deeply about the relationship versus the transaction. That's kind of the good that I see in it. And I think the ones that will do that are going to be much more likely to make it through this and thrive.
I 100% agree. Yeah.
So, Katie, if somebody's out there and they've heard our conversation and they realize, I need me some of that market research. How do they find you, and how do they learn more about how they could incorporate this into their business?
Sure. So MackenzieCorp.com is our website. On there, actually, we do have, we just recently, my sister did a 6-part series on stay relevant, be relevant, that actually like talks through some of those steps, that does have some worksheets that you can download, and all that information is on our blog page on our website. That then is kind of just at least like a getting started step. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all under MacKenzie Corp.
Awesome. Well, Katie, thanks so much for carving out time for us today, and love the conversation, and blessings to you in your business and with your family.
Thank you. Same to you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Marketing Trail Guide podcast. Next time, I'll be talking with Noelle Bercelis, Executive Director of the Ronald McDonald House of Orange County, about how to lead an organization through difficult waters. If you found this episode valuable, please give us a 5-star review and hit the subscribe button for more on how to find and benefit from opportunities in crisis. You can find the notes for this week's episode, plus all our existing episode and much more content at marketingtrailguide.com.